You are in the new version of our studio.
Yeah. It's actually really nice in
Yeah.
here. It's really nice in here.
We didn't have items before, and now we got items. Okay, so we make a video show as well where we go all around the world.
hmm
So the goal is to get objects from people as we go and keep decorating this back wall. But so you're gonna be haunted by my metal face. Oh, and
Oh, holy shit, that is haunting.
for people who are just listening, you're gonna have to go to the YouTube channel or the Substack to see what we're talking about. Welcome to the Core Memory Podcast, friends. This is Ashley Vance, and I'm with Baiju Bhatt. How are you?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
I love this neighborhood. We talked about this a little bit before
Okay?
we started.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll get right super quick, just so people know. I mean, you're the co-founder of Robinhood.
Yeah.
You are now running a space energy company called Atherflux. And so this is some of the background. You went to Stanford, co-founded Robinhood, did that for a while. Now are off in Spaceland, but you're saying so Robinhood, you started in this neighborhood.
We had a couple of offices. Well, there were many offices that led up to it, but this one was the important one in my opinion.
Okay.
So this was like right after, I think we launched the product out of that office. And I'm saying it's like literally on the corner of this building. We launched the product out of that office. We did a big public release there. I was like 4 or 5 years there. It was like I remember that was like the really fun, exciting time.
Yeah.
Like that. We did options there. We launched crypto out of that building. Yeah, we did a bunch of stuff out of there. I have like such warm memories of this. I remember like we moved into that building and like when we first moved in, we didn't have like they were still doing construction on it. And so this building used to be the Fry's building.
Yes. No, we're in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I remember when we first moved in, we didn't have bathrooms. So if you had to go to the bathroom, you'd have to like go run over to the bathroom there.
Yeah, this is hallowed ground for people. Some people who listen will know, but we're inside of Playground Global. This is where I set up my studio. It's in Palo Alto, and yeah, this used to be a Fry's. It was like the Silicon Valley Fry. There was one in Sunnyvale, but this
one was the weird one.
Yeah,
this one was the really weird one.
If you don't know what Fry's is, you should Google it and then weep that it doesn't exist anymore.
It evaporated.
Yeah, they shut them all, man. It's very sad.
Yeah, that was really sad.
All right, well, let's jump into it. I listened to a few interviews with you. You seem like a very chill, interesting guy. There's a million different directions we could go. I'll go biographical for a minute. Your family's from India. You kind of end up in Alabama and then Virginia.
Yeah.
I think you're an only child.
Yeah.
Yeah, and your dad ends up at NASA Langley in Virginia. So you're kind of in this space. I guess it's in your blood a bit.
It is. I mean, my dad has been like, it's been kind of a pretty central figure in my life. So he had this dream of always wanting to study theoretical physics. Like he was always very interested in quantum gravity and grand unification, which I think continues to be like the holy grail of intellectual endeavors in my humble opinion. But my dad, my grandfather, his dad in India was one of the first Western trained eye doctors in India. So he had like an optometry practice and he was like, all of my children are going to be doctors, right? And this is in Bhavnagar in India.
This episode is brought to you by Brex. At Core Memory, we spend tons of time with companies that are trying to build fast, and they often run into similar problems. Their corporate spend either spins out of control or slows them down. Brex was built to break that trade-off. It is the intelligent finance platform that helps you move faster and spend smarter. Cards, banking, expenses, all in one place with AI agents working in the background to handle annoying tasks like collecting receipts and enforcing corporate policies. This is a massive time saver for us. More than 35,000 companies use Brex, from early stage startups to giants like Anthropic and Zoom. and soon to be giants like core memory. We run on Brex, so should you. Go to brex.com/core memory to learn more.
And my dad was the youngest of all of his family members, or all of his brothers and sisters, and he always wanted to study physics. So the story he tells me is, he starts out undergrad doing biology and sort of creeps his way towards chemistry, and then starts a PhD in chemistry, and then sort of transitions to physical chemistry, and then leaves that to go and join my grandfather's optometry business to
Okay.
do contact lens. And then he's applying to PhD programs in the US to study physics, and he's applying and he's applying and he's applying. And the story tells me is he's like, I decided that I was going to devote myself to science. I was going to be a bachelor. And so he puts Kumar at the end of his name, so Praful Kumar, which apparently means that you're going to be a bachelor. And then I think he was applying and applying and applying, and kind of was like, I don't know if this is going to happen or not. Ends up getting married to my mom. And then the rapid sequence of events, as he's told me, is like they get married. He gets into the University of Huntsville, Alabama. My mom is pregnant with me, like kind of all in rapid succession. And my mom had like no interest in coming to America. She didn't speak English. She was also the youngest of like all of her siblings, and she was very, very family oriented. She wanted to stay and like, be with the family in India. And she kind of got thrust into coming to America because what she tells me is she goes to the embassy and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're pregnant. You have a little boy in there." They just like stamp the visa. It's like the little boy's going to be an American. And my mom tells me she like leaves the embassy in tears, like doesn't want to do this.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I end up in Alabama. And the way my parents described those first couple of years, like, woof, seemed rough.
It's got to be just a massive shock, especially. I mean, Huntsville, I guess, is Alabama, and not in some ways just because it has so much research and science going on. And so it's maybe a little less stereotypical than what people might think of, but then also plenty of.
But then again, it was the 80s.
Yeah.
It was a very different time.
Yeah. So they were probably like one of the only Indian families in the city.
Yeah, they had a couple of Indian friends around. I remember the story my mom tells me is I was born. They knew one Indian family that were doctors in Warrensburg, Missouri, so right outside of Kansas City. And my mom was about to give birth to me, and so she just goes there because I don't know if they could really afford medical treatment. And so they're like, okay, we're just gonna go. You're gonna give birth and just stay with the doctors that we know in America. And so, yeah. And it was pretty crazy because, like, within the first couple of years of them coming to the US, my dad's kidneys failed.
I was digging in all this. I mean, and very dramatically. I mean, a multi-year health, life and death struggle.
Yeah, he was on dialysis my whole childhood.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, I didn't like, I mean, I was a little kid, right? And so I kind of was like insulated from it in many ways. And my parents this was like kind of the thing, right? It was like my dad was very adamant. He's like, education is the way forward. He's like, education, education, education. That's your path forward in life. And all, kind of that plus like they would tell me, it's like, look, we're making great sacrifices to be in this country. And because they had all this family in India. Obviously, they're better, well-to-do in America, but like they had like such a rich life in India, and they're like, we're kind of making a sacrifice to be here. And so that was like kind of as I got a little bit older, because education was kind of like the thing that I kind of anchored myself on. So I do really well in school, that's kind of like my path.
I wanted to ask you about this because I heard you talk about it, and I found it unfulfilling on a couple levels. I mean, so you were saying my sense was like you were not like an academic all-star until you flipped this switch in your head. What age did that lesson click?
Oh yeah, we're gonna get right into it, right? So this was like it's like probably one of the defining moments of my life. So my dad, his kidneys failed pretty soon after come to the US, and he gets a job at Langley, NASA Langley, working as a scientist. And it was really good because that was like how they were paying for all the medical bills. And my dad was on dialysis my entire childhood. So I remember there was like the big dialysis machine that my dad would have to, use every night. And then when I was in 8th grade, my dad's kidney disease kind of took a turn for the worse. So he had some sort of infection of his inner stomach cavity, which just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And then at some point, he had stopped working, and then he just went to the hospital. He was in the hospital for a long time and had like multiple medical procedures where they kind of like, did big surgeries on him to try to save him from this. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, holy shit, like, I'm only child, like God forbid the worst happens. Like what the heck am I gonna do? And like even as such, like we were pretty poor family in Southern Virginia, which is to say we, like it's not the wealthiest part of the world to begin with. And I'm like, I kind of convinced myself during this period of time that I'm like, if I do really, really well in school, like that'll be like my path to stay, even if the worst happens to my dad, which by the way, he's healthy and happy, and I'm going to see him probably 2 days from now. So just want to, I don't want to make it sound too grim, but like, I remember during that time, I was like, kind of flipped a switch where I'm like, I have to do really fucking well in school because that's how I get to stay in America,
Yeah.
basically.
And so, like, I mean, clearly you're a bright guy. You just were not, you were what? I mean, what were you doing before that? You were just not super driven. You're kind of phoning it in, or not. Or
You know, I did okay in school before that. I remember I took the one thing that felt kind of a gut punch to me right before that, and was like 6th or 7th grade. I took the PSATs, and I remember I did not do very well on that. And that was like the first time where it was like, Beju, you are not growing up in an English speaking family. Like your vocabulary is like super, super set back.
yeah.
Because I didn't learn English until I was like 4 or 5 years old. Like I learned Gujarati with my mom, and the two of us learned English together watching TV.
Okay.
So I remember before that kind of just like not having a ton of confidence in my academic abilities. And then when I entered high school, like right as my dad, that really bad turn in his health kind of he ends up recovering from that, and he recovers from that. And I remember he gets a kidney transplant within a few months of that. 'Cause they were like, give this man a kidney
Yeah.
for goodness sake. Um, And then when I get to high school, the switch flipped where I'm like, I'm going to be very, very, very dedicated to schoolwork. And I remember thinking math in particular was like very challenging. And at some point it stopped being challenging. I kept like doing it enough where it started coming naturally to me. And it kind of taught me this thing where if you don't understand something very well the first time, you can just try to learn it again. And like every time you learn a difficult concept, like you learn it once, you put it down, you learn it again, you put it down, you learn it again. Every time you learn it again, there's like some part of the thing you didn't understand that starts to feel intuitive. So the next time you go back to it, you're like, okay, I kind of believe I believe my understanding of that thing. And you can kind of build and build and build on top of that.
I'll ask you a question that's not terribly novel, but I wonder if you think about this as you're like starting a family and everything. I mean, I grew up. My dad was a lawyer for Exxon. We were quite. We were well off, fine. Not terribly. I would say kind of like challenged as a human, and then my parents both had cancer when I was in my teenage years, and my mother's cancer was um, quite bad, and so I remember that being this massively having this kind of huge impact on me in the moment of like there were a couple times when it seemed like she was not going to make it, and then it's kind of funny because I always felt like I was bright, but I did fine at school, but I was never like someone who was just really dedicated to like, to school, and this is I was just gonna do everything possible to do well. And it's not like that switch flipped, but I feel like all this stuff that happened to me as a kid kind of then had these knock-on effects later, right? Like you sort of want to sharpen the steel a little bit, and build your character through these events. I think about this all the time because it's like as a parent, you don't want to make life easy for your kids, but you don't want them to suffer either, right? And you don't like actively seek out tragic events
You
to
don't want to make it fake hard for them.
right, right.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer, I write all these books about people, and there are some common themes that seem to occur, and difficult childhoods are often one of them.
Yeah.
And then as a parent, you're like, what are you supposed to do, man? Are you supposed to torture these kids just to kind of sharpen them and give them this character? But having gone
Have you
through
figured it out?
no, not at all. And then this is like something, you just kind of continually battle with. I'm not sure there's a right answer on this. I write enough about um, fairly eccentric, overachieving, exceptional people, and there does seem to be, it's not totally universal, but it's fairly close in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, at least for me, right? It's like the biggest challenge, like the biggest competition, the biggest sort of like struggle that I'm trying to overcome is usually internal, right? It's like me versus my own perception of what I think I can do or what's possible.
Yeah.
And I've kind of, so on the kid side, I don't know that I've got an answer to that. I think that the place that I've kind of landed is like my kids are gonna have totally different upbringing than me. And rather than trying to pattern match to something that I went through, it's like, be honest with the situation, right? They're well-to-do kids. They're going to have access to a lot of opportunities, and kind of tell them, like, whatever you do in life. I wonder if they'll listen to this someday. Whatever they do in life, right? Like, just make sure you try to be the best at it. Doesn't matter what you do. Just try to strive for the best that you can possibly be at it. And I think that you know, you can do that without a ton of struggle too, right? Like there's examples of like lots of scientists that are like the children of successful people, right? So like I don't think you have to go through trial by fire to end up with the drive.
Yeah. 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 I think there's
At least the optimist in me hopes that that's
no,
true.
no. I think there's
You don't
truth.
have to have just like a shitload of tragedy going on in life to.
There's this book, The Hintons and the Bulls. I think that's what it's called. It's about these two families that are just academically and like worldly exceptional for centuries, and they are quite well off and privileged and going to like Oxford and Cambridge and all these things. And Jeff Hinton is one of these
Oh, is
people.
he?
Yeah, yeah. They like there's somebody who invents everything from like the playground to GDP to the Tesseract. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
Fascinating. I need
Yeah,
to look this up.
yeah. It's a little dry, but I think about 5 people have read it, which is sad, but it's fascinating.
The Bernoullis were like that too, right? There was like
I
generations of Bernoullis
yeah,
that were prominent scientists.
yeah. Yeah, it's wild. This family is incredible. I recommend people at least go to Wikipedia. You can just by clicking on their names, you can you can keep going down this rabbit hole for hours.
How many generations does that go
I
back?
mean, it goes back to the mathematician Boole, right? I mean, it's like we're talking 300 years or so, I think. Yeah.
All right, kiddos of mine, if you're listening someday, strive for that.
So you end up applying to Caltech, MIT, Harvard, and Stanford, and I think that's it.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Right.
right.
So there's got to be like some measure of confidence that you've done some exceptional things in high school to feel like that can be your short list of where you're going to apply.
Well, that was my optimistic list. I applied early to all of those.
Okay. And so,
Stanford was the one that if I got in was binding.
was binding.
Yeah.
So, but I've just been going through this process with my son, and when I heard your list, I was like, okay, this dude he was
That's
feeling
the
it.
bravado right there.
Yeah, yeah. So what had you done in high school? I'm assuming you did fine on the SAT. You had good grades. Like, what had you gotten into in high school that made you feel this confidence going in?
Yeah, I was really into science. So I worked a couple of summers at this place called Jefferson Lab. You know
Mhm.
about this? It's a particle accelerator
I
in
do a little
Southern
bit.
Virginia.
Yeah, yeah.
I worked there. I did some research, published that, sort of like was on the science talent search sort of track. I was also very driven at math and physics. very, very, very driven at math and physics. And I knew um, when I kind of discovered that love, when I kind of realized that I could do that if I just tried really hard, I could do well at math and physics, and that it was actually kind of hard for everybody, but if you just kept trying, you would get better and better at it. That was kind of the thing that motivated me to go down that path. And also growing up around my dad's love of it was like very infectious, right? So like he was very interested in the idea of grand unification, the idea of quantum gravity, and had his own sort of take on like why others might have been wrong about their take on quantum gravity. And kind of growing up around that, I was like, I remember the first time I kind of thought about this, I was like, is there a theory of everything? Like, you know, could that actually be a thing? And if that is, like, what else in this world could possibly be worth understanding if not that? Like, that seems like the most interesting thing
Yeah.
you could possibly study. And so that was kind of like the passion that took me to physics. But like what gave me the confidence to do that? I mean, I did really well in school, in high school, right? I was like, okay, I actually this is I think one of the first examples of like a thing that as I reflect back now, this is actually one of the first examples of a thing that I learned about myself, that if you just set the goalpost like arbitrarily ambitious, right?
Yeah.
You probably end up doing it. Like if you just want to do the really, really, really ambitious thing, which in that case was like, why can't I get into one of the best schools? Like, why not? I'm
Yeah.
like very good at school already. Like, why can't I go to Stanford? And granted, in the high school that I went to, I don't think that anybody had ever gotten into Stanford. A little high school called Pocosin High School, which I have extremely fond memories of. But I'm like, why can't I do this?
But you didn't tuck a safety school in there.
Well, I was going to apply to a ton of schools
If
if I
you
did get
didn't get
in.
in, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think I got waitlisted at Harvard. I think I got waitlisted at MIT, which means basically just chuck you back into the general pool. And I got into Caltech and Stanford was binding. And I'd never been out here before. I was like, all right, here we go. Let me
Yeah.
go on, the website and buy a hoodie.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to ask this next question with comes from a place of respect and I'll ask it, but this is not meant to be mean-spirited or anything.
No,
I'm just not into finance tech. I never have been. I'm into machines and engineering and all this stuff. And clearly, look, Robinhood worked out okay for you. So God bless. But you're this kid who's into math and physics. It's obviously a calling. It's a passion. Clearly, you're coming back to it in life. Did you not, when you're at Stanford and you're starting to do stuff in finance, and then you're having the idea for Robinhood? I mean, were there questions about, is this the best way to use my brain and spend my time?
I mean, at some level, yeah.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, my love of physics and math is like that's been like the intellectual North Star my whole life. And I remember when I was graduating from Stanford, with my master's in math, I was like, am I going to apply to PhD programs? Like, what am I going to do? And this was right before the 2008 sort of like collapse. And I remember around that time, my dad was like, like you should start looking for a job. Like you have, like a big student debt situation. Like, and like we should start making some money. And I was like, frankly, I was like, fuck. Like, I kind of want to be an academic. And so I started applying for jobs, and I'm like, well, I'll apply for jobs and maybe I'll do that for a year. And there was just a lot of economic uncertainty. And my dad was kind of like, you should take a serious look at getting a job because there was a chance that he was going to lose his job. So I think I went into the idea of getting a job very begrudgingly. And I also pretty quickly realized that I had basically no marketable skills, which was...
I was a philosophy major. I understand this feeling.
Yeah, I remember I interviewed at like Apple, I interviewed at Google, and I just got the door fucking slammed in my face.
Yeah.
Like, we're not hiring you. Like, and the big thing then was I was like, well, I'm a mathematician and I know physics, but they're like, these are software jobs. And I'm like, probably should have taken some software classes at Stanford. And I just remember when I was applying to these jobs, like I did not know how to write code. Like I just never really studied it. And I was the kid at Stanford. I was like, I'm here to study physics and math, and I'm pretty sure that I can learn the rest of the stuff on the job or at a later point in life, but I'm not going to get a chance to learn foundational physics and math, but from like the greatest sort of students of this in the world, which are at Stanford, the
Yeah.
professors at Stanford. And so I was like, I was, how to say it? I feel like I was a bit of an intellectual snob in that regard, and I probably should have like applied for more jobs. But yeah, so that's kind of how I ended up applying to a bunch of jobs. I was like getting turned down a bunch. I ended up getting a job in finance in Marin. And I remember I was like, okay, like, how do I feel about this? Like, do I care about this? Do I not care about this? And I remember pretty early on, um, it did capture my imagination, and I'll try to explain why I found it intellectually interesting. A part of studying math and physics is the number of people that understand what you're doing, the number of people that care. As you get deeper and deeper down the research rabbit hole, it gets smaller and smaller
Yeah.
and smaller. And so there was the distinct feeling that I was kind of wrestling with, which was like, I don't know that I'm doing something that's super relevant for the world if I'm going to go down the academic route. Because if you're studying, I was like very interested in this topic called algebraic geometry, and in particular, like you know, the zero sets of you know, complex polynomial equations, like what higher dimensional sort of shapes look like and stuff like that. But I was like, who the fuck knows what this is or cares? Or like kind of thinking to myself, like, is this ever going to be relevant for humanity? Like, might this be relevant in 100 years, 200 years? Like, what is the point of this? And I remember getting into finance and kind of doing that in the beginning and realizing that I kind of saw the parallels between concepts that I'd learned in physics and these concepts in the markets. And the one that I think really was the first one that captured my imagination was the idea of degrees of freedom,
Okay.
right? Because if you think about the idea of like the stock market as emergent phenomenon versus the sort of primordial interactions, right? The primordial interactions are like buy and sell orders, right? You put a market order, a limit order, a buy, replace, cancel orders, right? And you have each individual market participant, which has its own set of agendas. Like some people are, you know, they're doing arbitrage. Other people are sort of doing long-term investing. Other people are doing statistical arbitrage, so on and so on, right? And each person is doing, or each market participant is doing these like little primordial interactions with it. But the emergent phenomenon is the stock price. The emergent phenomenon is like the market as a whole. And as you have more and more people doing it, like you stop being able to draw a direct through line between the emergent phenomenon and these individual interactions, which is very similar to statistical mechanics, right? Like the obvious one is like grains of sand falling down from like an hourglass, right? Like how do you explain that shape of like the way the sand slides down?
Sure.
And so kind of that was, I think, one of the first times where I was like, oh, interesting. Like I can kind of use the physics brain that I have to think about this. On top of that, this is relevant for people. And I kind of realized that was like this thing that I was really craving and that I didn't feel like I had really any exposure to academically. And so I think that was the thing that sort of sparked my love of it.
Hello, geniuses. Let me tell you about E1 Ventures. They are a venture capital firm in Silicon Valley, a longtime supporter of this podcast, and a longtime supporter of big, fantastic, world-changing ideas. If you have such an idea, hit up E1 Ventures or send me a note, and I'll put you in touch with E1 Ventures. It's quite a deal for listening to this podcast. Thank you again, as always, to E1 Ventures for their support.
My journey through building Robinhood was very focused around the products, right? And like, why do people use these? Like, why is this useful for people? Like, how do you build something that, and this is kind of like the big intellectual question, right? It's like, how do you as a person come up with something that millions of people find useful? Like that as an intellectual challenge felt utterly insurmountable. Like, because if you think about that, right, it's like the world is a very efficient place, and we all have things that we're doing in our lives and use cases and the way technology fits in. And like, how the heck are you ever going to find something that like is a big missing need for tons and tons of people?
Okay, yeah, well, I want to ask you a question about
Yeah.
that. I mean, I'm gonna warn people. We're not gonna go Robinhood heavy on this podcast. When I looked at some of your other interviews, that was like there were huge spikes every time you talked about Robinhood. So
Is
maybe
that right?
maybe I'm self-defeating here, but
I'm very proud of the company.
no. And
Yeah.
I just mean I'm more space land than finance land. So
You and me both at this point.
it's just kind of where my head goes. But so if you go back, you got 2008 financial crisis, you've got Occupy Wall Street. People are angry at the banks being bailed out. They're angry at the greed. They're angry at a lot. The whole situation. And then I have to confess. I mean, obviously I know what Robinhood is. All this stuff. I again just don't use these things on like a day-to-day basis. So some of this is coming from a position of naivete. But things like I have been into stocks my whole life. And so it's like, we'd gone through this era where the cost of trades had just been going down towards zero for a long time. E-Trade, decades before was kind of like pioneering some of this stuff. And so like when Robinhood comes out, I actually do not, I mean, I have like a anecdotal sort of visceral sense of why it took off, but was it in this moment, it gets pitched as like you were creating a trading app for the people and so coming out of the financial crisis, the common man, the common person had been trod on. But then I was trying to wrap my head around this too, because it's like, oh, but you could trade for anyone who had money could get on and like trade on a brokerage account. It wasn't all that hard beforehand. So what was the thing that made Robinhood take off?
Yeah, I mean, I,
Because in just context for people, I mean,
yeah,
you guys were offering like free
zero commission
trades,
stock trading.
zero
Yeah.
commission trades, yeah, and a really polished app and like kind of, I would say like a modernized
It was a very
feel.
different take on
Yeah.
what investing in the stock market looked and felt like. The this kind
Are these questions offensive?
No, not at all, not at all. I'm just kind of gathering my thoughts here a little bit. The thing that was this kind of comes back to what I was saying a second ago. Like my love of doing that fundamentally was about like a love of understanding how people think about these things. And so in the process of kind of figuring out this idea of product market fit, like how do you build something that people find useful, right? Like how do you do that? Like what does it even, because is it just like, oh, I had a good idea, and because I think it's a good idea, other people are going to think it's a good idea. I never found that it really worked like that. And what was a pretty early lesson for me was because when we started the company, one of our first investors was Google Ventures. And I remember early on, I was very interested in design. Like that was the part of it that I wanted to get good at because I had a huge love of Steve Jobs. Like Steve Jobs was my idol as an entrepreneur. And I'm like, man, that guy did amazing stuff with design. Like, how did he come up with these products that people loved? And in those early conversations with Google Ventures, they were like, you should talk to customers. Like you should interview the people that are going to use your products because there might be a pretty big gap between how you think people are going to use it and how other people are actually going to use it. And I think finance is this thing that really puts that in utter and complete focus. Because the way that people use financial products, if you've got a lot of money, totally different than how the ordinary person does it. I contrast that with something like Google Maps, right? If you're Bill Gates and you're using Google Maps, probably the same as you or I or the average person on the street, right? You have to like figure out where you're trying to go, type in the name of the place, and you just go there. Or Gmail, right? And if you're a super wealthy person, you might have more emails in your inbox, but you're still using Gmail probably or Apple Mail or one of these things. Like the product doesn't look and feel fundamentally different based on your life circumstances. Finance, totally different. And what I remember thinking was, and using all the products around the time, is like, these are really targeted for people that are at or around retirement age. Like, that's kind of what the value proposition of these were. And I remember looking at the kind of people that use the stock market before Robinhood, and it was an older demographic of Americans. And it was usually sort of upper middle class, like kind of not quite the people that were using the wealth management, high net worth people, but the upper middle class people. That's kind of who was targeted at. And I remember thinking to myself, there's a reason young people don't use this stuff. Like, it doesn't really fit the needs that young people have. And like, well, how do you do that? So what we did early on, and this was the part that I really loved, is we would take the prototypes of the products that we build, and we would go and interview an audience of people that were just not really spoken to by the financial markets. Like, we would actually go to Stanford campus on Saturday mornings and go hang out outside of the coffee shop and recruit college students and be like, how would you use this? Like, what part of this is useful for you? And the stuff that kind of came through that was, in retrospect, a very big deal was like, when you had an account minimum, right? It's like you had to have $5,000 to get started. That was a pretty huge intellectual burden for people, because it's the idea of like, they don't really even know if they want to do this or not. And then you make the gravity of the decision of whether you should invest in the stock market get that much heavier by being like, you have a minimum before you get started. Or the idea of like having to pay a commission every time you trade, which was like actually a pretty big deal for people. Even if you look at it, it's like, well, what's, $5 or $10 here or there, which is kind of what the commissions were back then. It was a big deal for people. And it was like the thing that made them think twice about whether they wanted to do it or not. And so kind of systematically understanding the sort of preferences and like how younger people or younger generation of people would think about this, and building the product for that audience of people with the kind of thesis that if you can make something culturally relevant for young people, this was my viewpoint. If you can make something culturally relevant for young people, it's actually the burden of the rest of society to understand why it's cool.
Okay.
Right? Like, young people are the ones that are the tastemakers in our society. And so like really focusing on that as the product was emerging from nothing was what the strategy was.
Okay.
And also that was a fundamentally underserved audience, and one that we were like, if we want to change the trajectory of how people on the whole think about money, which was another big part of this, was like young people. I remember at the time it was not cool to be on top of your finances. Like, there was like a sort of, you're like, it's like, well, I don't care about that stuff, was kind of like a badge of pride. I remember thinking to myself, what the fuck is that about? Like, it's not cool to not know what you're doing, especially when it's about you. You got to take care of yourself, right?
Yeah. I think my perspective is all skewed. My dad had me trading stocks when I was like 8 years old.
Oh, did he?
Like telling me about IRAs and things. So I think I probably, I think I'm messed up.
So those are some of the thoughts going into it.
Okay.
My mom actually was the one that got me into investing.
Yeah. When you were a kid?
No, a little bit older, like in college.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad was cool, man. He would let me buy with my allowance, like 1 or 2 shares or partial shares, and we would just keep track of it on paper. And just because for some of the reasons you outlined, I couldn't have my own brokerage account and buy these small chunks of things, because if you bought 1 share of whatever and you're paying this $12-15 commission on it, it was a massive percentage of that share that you were buying. So he would let me buy. He should have. He was on this early, man. So he would let me buy them, and then I remember every 3 months I would go and tabulate all my dividends and come back to him, and he'd pay me out.
Yeah. It's I mean, that's very cool. I kind of looking back on where the impact of like the thing that they created today, it's like there's a complete vibe shift amongst the younger demographic, right? Like, people care about their finances. And I think that's a good thing.
Okay, this is my last possibly hostile question, I think.
Dude, I've gotten way more hostile questions than that.
When same thing when I was going through some of your other interviews and then I hopped down into the YouTube comments, which was always a dangerous
Oh boy.
place to
Oh
go.
Jesus.
And no secret that during the whole meme stock GameStop era, people got really upset because you had this group of people that were trying to fight for the common man again, and take down the hedge funds and the short sellers and everything with GameStop, and they felt like they were having a moment there, and you guys paused trading and for a couple days, I think, and yeah, so it was like this thing that you guys had kind of pitched as um being for the common person, was now, it felt like it was being turned against them a bit. And so yeah, I saw you on the Sean Ryan podcast, and he went into this a little bit, and then the comment is just riddled with people being like, he didn't explain
Jeez. Yeah.
the GameStop saga, satisfactorily. And I obviously you guys were going through this big, I mean, it was like a black swan type event, and you got to manage the having enough money to backstop all this stuff. You've got to manage the technology, and then you've got to manage the PR consequences of all of this as well. But I felt like, obviously, it kind of dinged you guys with a certain group of people that,
Like a lot of
yeah,
people.
yeah,
Yeah.
and probably
We don't have
one,
to sugarcoat that at all.
yeah, and ones that had actually been Robinhood,
Yep.
inclined. So yeah, I don't know. Well, so the commenters were upset. They felt like didn't get into that enough. I felt like you addressed it. I mean, you describe it as this very difficult moment. You'd been pulling back from the co-CEO role a bit, and
Yeah, like a month or two before.
yeah,
Actually, right before.
so Vlad, your co-founder, he's in he's in the thick of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Really rough.
I mean, so what's your take? I mean, was that hard to see this thing you'd built? Yeah, I guess the other knock sometimes, people feel like it's like the gamification of finance a bit, and getting people maybe to like be gambling, more than their resources might allow. Yeah, I mean, how have you processed all this stuff?
Well, I mean, looking back on it now, which luckily we can look back, I think it was like 5 years ago, a couple of days ago.
Yeah,
Um, we had spent the better part of our adult lives at this point, like on this mission to democratize finance for people. And to end up in that situation where, like, as we had kind of brought this thing to the mainstream, this, like, you know, once in a generation event happens where, like, the way I kind of reflect on it looking back is like there was a few forces that were on an absolute collision course, right? One was like internet meme culture, which, like, we can't control that. Like, we have that's like a thing that's happening on Reddit. Like, there's no way you can put any kind of bounds on that. Like, and we're not running Reddit,
yeah.
right? We have it's like on another platform that's happening. And at the same time, there was like all of like people were in a shoebox for a couple of like the better part of a year at that point with COVID, and just sort of like everything that was happening on the internet was just getting exploded up.
Yeah, we didn't know anything else to do, man.
Yeah, and all that stuff on a collision course with like capitalism basically. And we were unfortunately right at the center of that. And I remember when it was happening, right? Like our focus was on how do we like do the right thing here, and how do we survive this situation, because it was extremely taxing on, like from the financial side of the business to the technology side of the business.
Like, you guys needed money to cover these trades. I mean,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
why you had to pause.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there were all these conspiracy theories that were happening. And at some point it was like the conspiracy theories have kind of cemented themselves in reality. And the number of like, regardless of how much we push back on it, people just don't believe us. We're like, well, what do you do in that situation? Right. And there was kind of the realization that it was going to be a long slog to get back. Right. It was going to be a long time before this thing turned around. Which, I mean, as a person that one of the two creators of this thing, right? It was brutal personally. But it was also one of those moments where it's like we have to fix this. We have to like bring this thing back. Like, we have to do what it takes, even if it takes a long time to do it. And I remember I was like, all right, like I just stepped back, but like there's no way in the world that I can't not be spending 100% of my time focused on this thing. This is my life's work at this point, right? It's incredibly important that we get this thing back and like make sure people understand like we're doing this to, again, that was like the North Star for us always. It's like, why does this company exist? It's the mission to democratize finance for people, right? And it was a very simple and kind of pure thing, right? It's like, as long as we're doing that and we're giving people access to it, over time, people are going to realize that that's the real reason that we're doing this stuff. There's not other reasons behind this.
Is it annoying to have to, you might have to answer questions like this for a very long time?
No, I don't really care. I mean, look, it happened. It was at the time it was, I mean, it was just like overwhelming. Like the amount of negativity was overwhelming. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, do you use the product? Do you like, do you realize you're not paying commissions anymore? Like, how do you think that happened? Like, who do you think did that?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, yeah, we're not perfect, but like, how can you not look at the volume of what we've done and just think we're horrible because of this one day?
It's a revolution, man.
Yeah. But it was, it's kind of wild. It's 5 years ago at this point, right? From my perspective, it both feels like yesterday and 20 years ago at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, it launched like, at least I remember there were about 6 movie pitches within like a week of this happening, and books. Like Ben Mesrick somehow, I don't think he probably does as much reporting as I pride myself on doing. He seems to turn these books around pretty quick. Did you read any of these books? Did you watch any of the movies?
Nope.
None of them.
Nope. I have no interest in that. Like, I live the real version of it. I don't need to see the fictitious versions of it. But I remember as this was happening afterwards, I'm like, various people on our team are like, there's a book being written, there's a movie being written, there's another book being written. And the first couple of times you just get like, like heart palpitations. You're like, holy shit, what are they gonna, like, what fictitious version of this is gonna show up?
Yeah.
And are we gonna have to defend ourselves against some fictitious version of what happened here? And then at some point you're like, you know what? You can't control the internet. People are gonna do what they're gonna do. We're gonna control what we can control. And that, it's like at some level, I feel like I kind of left that situation with a level of zen.
Yeah, well, I mean, because you're about to get you could get social networked, pretty.
I mean, you did,
you
right?
did. Although, Social Network is one of these movies that's entered the cultural pantheon. And
well, that movie was good,
right? That's what I mean. And the GameStop ones felt like they clearly did not achieve.
Yeah, I feel like I could poop on those movies. Yeah, I remember there's
how do you know they're not good if you don't watch
I actually don't know. I have no idea. I remember the dude that played me. I remember hearing that he didn't actually grow his hair out.
Okay.
And it was a wig, which I just want you to pull on. This is real.
I appreciate it.
Completely real.
Okay. And okay. So
yeah, I mean, I think on this kind of bookend this, right? I think there's like, I don't know if there's a super like one line satisfactory answer.
Yeah.
Like, it was a difficult thing.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So you come out of that, and then this is like a return to his roots. I was thinking about your story a little bit. There's another guy who I'm familiar with who had a very successful finance tech exit and then got into space, and so you're kind of following this Muskian path a little bit. Tell me that what's happening coming out. You're already pulling back a bit at Robinhood. You clearly were starting to think about maybe the next chapter of your life, and so walk me through this path. You get through this crisis now, and then I assume you get to regroup again. And
I mean, there was years and years of rebuilding.
Yeah,
right. And so I left Robinhood full time, like February, March of 24. It's almost 2 years ago now.
Yeah. Okay.
Still on the board, still involved with the company. But I like my journey into this was like back in like 2010, 11, 12. I remember just being very, very interested in doing something, one, energy related, and two, space related. Like, I remember back then there was this idea of like, I remember reading in the wee hours that Vlad and I would stay up, like writing code, reading about people that were like doing helium-3 mining on the moon and being like, whoa, like, why do you need helium-3? It's like, oh, and the people doing fusion and these sort of like frontier tech things. And at the time, having a physics background, I'm like, I don't know how much of this stuff is like actually doable versus I kind of put in the bucket of like the string theory bucket where it's cool ideas, but nothing material is going to materialize in your lifetime. And I remember just being like, man, if I ever get a chance to do a space company, like that's something I would really like to do. And also watching um, SpaceX try to launch and land rockets and just watching that with a level of fascination and being like, oh my God, is this actually going to happen? The other part of this also was that book, The Case for Mars, which I'm sure you've
Robert
read.
Super, yeah.
Yeah, that book left a very, very big impression on me. And even as recently as like, 2 or 3 years ago, like I would give that out as like required reading for people at Robinhood because I just love the idea of it so much and the sort of like engineering approach to space exploration versus the government approach to space exploration and kind of the idea that there were some connecting threads between what we did with sort of bringing capitalism to the masses and that there was this important role that capitalism needed to play in the space industry to sort of get it unstuck. And kind of asking myself, like, is there a commercial thing that people haven't really thought about in space yet, where if you look at it from components and first principles, it's doable, right? One of the thoughts that I kind of had going into this was like, if I wanted to do something space related, I was not interested in a science project. Like I did not want to do a science project because while it's interesting, I think the dream was to try to do something commercial because if you could do something commercial, if I did something commercial, I could kind of take the engineering and the business mind that I developed, in the ensuing 15 years since I graduated, plus the fact that I loved and understood physics to like break ground. And the idea was if you could make something that's commercial in space or a new application for space that's commercial, I could have a similar impact on that industry that I did to finance. And in that, I mean, a generation of young people went from thinking finance was not cool to being like, oh, not only is this interesting, but maybe I want to work in this industry. There's a lot of good jobs there.
Yeah, arguably even more possibly because, I mean, space remains a terrible commercial exercise in many, many ways.
It does, yeah.
Rockets is about the worst business you can be in. SpaceX is clearly the best at it. I'm still not even like fully convinced that they make that much money from the rocket launches
Yeah.
themselves. Starlink is really sort of this miraculous revenue generator for them and one of the biggest businesses in space. You've got imaging satellites, which is like a pretty good business. It's like
You got the spooky stuff.
you got this, but so that's still clearly you've got all the like government. I mean, it's still the government will pay for things, scientists will pay for things. Then you've got communications and imaging, and then the list starts to run out very, very quickly of like,
Yep.
okay, we're in this new era. Rockets are cheaper than ever before. Satellites have finally kind of entered the consumer tech wave where you can make cheaper satellites that can
Yep.
do all kinds the economics are changing. You've got way more rides to space than you've ever had before. So you can actually get up there on a decent timeline if you're
We
doing
got 2
things
of them
right.
this year.
2 launches for you guys. Yeah. No, I want to get in all this, but it's been. I wrote a book that's called like When the Heavens Went on Sale. I mean, it's the rise of commercial space, but it's been frustrating because it's like there's this feeling we're in like this
What do you
internet
do with it?
era, right? Where it's like we're building the infrastructure, we're giving you all the tools, but it's like what do you do with it? And so people for a long time have talked about we're going to grow new kinds of chemicals and pharmaceuticals in space because a lack of gravity lets you arrange molecules in interesting ways. Space data centers have been around for a long time. Suddenly they're in vogue again as an idea. And then energy, has been energy, manufacturing. Oh, there are all these fascinating ideas, but clearly hard things to do, hard things to get off the ground, hard to build a proper business around it. So Atherflux fits into this energy category. And so I love it because it's like this is this new avenue we could be pursuing, and clearly energy is a big, massive business. So I just like this. I like the like it's not imaging, it's not communications. We're heading somewhere new with like a real proper business. So that part I'm so into. Why explain
That's kind of the idea.
of why it would be interesting. And same thing, like you said, I mean, I'll shut up here in a second, but this is kind of I spent years on all this stuff.
No, dude, I love hearing you talk about this. Like you're like I was kind of fanboying on you when you
Oh,
walked in here, right? Like your take on this stuff is super
oh
interesting.
man, this is super kind of you. I mean, we had this awesome era where old space had gotten so boring. So if you were a 20-something-year-old coming out of one of these schools, it's like, do you want to go work at Boeing or Lockheed, or do you want to go work at like Google and Facebook and make some money and do stuff, you know? And then SpaceX changed that clearly, and you have this like golden era decade of now there's like cool rocket companies you can go work at. But I've always worried it's like kind of like what's next, because if we don't make money from this stuff, you know, all the energy gets sucked out and you lose the young people. So this, you know, when you were talking about that, it was like this feels like the moment where we need to see if these things check out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, I mean, I get the basic, I'll do a bad job explaining it and then turn it over to you, but you've got the sun, you know, this massive energy source that's kicking off all kinds of light and good things that we can harness. And so you want to put something in space to try to gather up a lot of this light that you can, and then you guys are trying to essentially with like lasers, I think, channel that energy, send it back to Earth where you
Hmm.
can shove it into some solar arrays and then a battery, and have kind of like energy on demand wherever you put these battery systems, whether they're relatively small for maybe like a military that's out in the field and needs energy on the fly, or obviously you can, I'm sure, make them bigger and bigger and bigger, and
Yeah.
sort of have like a central thing. But yeah, can you explain how Atherflux works?
Yeah. So first kind of starting out with the idea. So the idea was around building an energy company in space. And well, why that sort of like simple description of it, why does it matter? Because a decade ago, the idea was to build a finance company on mobile, right? So in both cases, the idea is there's this emerging platform, and the thought process is like, what is a vertical of the economy that doesn't yet natively exist on this platform? And if you could do that, like there's a huge opportunity if you can make it work. It's like an entire industrial sector
Yeah.
on a new platform. And I was kind of thinking about like, well, what are these applications for space that people have not thought of yet, where the component technology is there, right? Because you could definitely imagine use cases for space, which are just science experiments for a decade, 2 decades. My thesis was that the energy industry was kind of ready for space. One, because if there's going to be any economy in space, you're going to have energy as a component. Number one. Number two, the component technologies, in particular solar, like we're kind of building on the work of generations and generations of work to get the cost and the efficiency of solar to the point that it is terrestrially one of the, if not the cheapest forms of energy. But like if solar is so great, like why are we burning hydrocarbons all the time, right? And my kind of frustration point was like solar doesn't actually work that well. And California is a state that's invested heavily in solar, and like I don't think our energy grid is like the shining star of the world here.
Because you have to store it because the sun goes down, and because you have to transmit it
Yeah.
somewhere. Yeah. Okay.
And because it uses a lot of land. And the idea is that if you collect solar power in orbit, in particular these sun synchronous orbits, dawn dusk orbits, you can have your solar panels illuminated nearly continuously. And that this is actually kind of coming back to the point from a second ago. Low Earth orbit is actually a very hospitable environment for electronics applications. So, like, the idea behind this was, can we build an energy grid in space? And if so, what are the applications for this? And on the application side, this will kind of be the bridge between where we've started and where I think the company is going. We started with the idea of, well, the way that things have matured in the the space world is you find a new technology, you find a use case for it that's like government, DoD, military related in some way, mature the technology there for a while and see if you can get the economies of scale and the design sort of like to the right place that you can compete terrestrially. And so that was kind of the pattern I was trying to match with that I'm kind of trying to match right now with space-based solar power is like, in fact, there's a pretty concrete use case for this that the Department of War has spelled out around getting energy into contested environments where there's no existing grid, and that if you could have this sort of persistent orbital energy grid, that you could get power down with very little infrastructure on the ground. And that's kind of the thing that we're going to be demonstrating starting this summer. And on this point, this sort of flows down to even how our ground stations work. Our concept for these things are they're unpowered and they're non-cooperative. So we actually are able to use reflective optics to have the satellite and the ground system recognize each other and know where the transmit power is being transmitted.
Okay.
And we could talk about that a little bit more as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
But the interesting thing is like as time has gone by, and I would say, earlier last year was when it was becoming clear to me that the entire energy industry was becoming about artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Right. And that we were kind of living through this period of time where the energy use for artificial intelligence was, I think when I started it, like a massive driver of energy use. And I kind of thought that that would be one of the applications that we would medium to long term be able to put some useful technology against. But I kind of realized that actually this was the problem to solve and that this was a more acute energy problem than I was probably going to see again in my lifetime.
AI or
AI.
Yeah. Okay.
And so a lot of the conversations early on were like, well, what if you, collect power in orbit and you beam it down to a data center, right? Like what about that idea? Why don't you do that, right? You're collecting power and you have this laser power transmission system as effectively power lines from space. And the conversation was like, well, yes, you could do that, but you actually lose so much of the energy in the transmission process that the first use cases for this technology are going to be really where there's no existing power grid. And then as the satellites get bigger and as the scale of things get bigger, then we would be able to kind of start solving for these data center applications, which are incredibly power dense.
I got you. So it's sort of like Starlink. I mean, it's not competitive against fiber in
In the first
the middle
instance.
of a city, right? In the first instance, and so you're going to these remote places where you can't get high speed internet, and then over time you realize the convenience of all this, and it becomes
Yeah.
this fabric that's like interlinking a whole bunch of stuff. But okay, so I get that. I get that.
It's just economies
Yeah.
of scale,
Yeah.
really. And the light bulb goes off sometime the sort of first half of last year. I'm like, actually, we kind of talk about building an electrical power grid in space. We talk about this environment being pretty hospitable for electronics applications, which, by the way, the laser power transmission is silicon semiconductor based, right? Like the photodiodes that
Mhm.
go from electrical to optical, these are semiconductors.
And it's hospitable because there's less radiation and
Yeah.
the temperatures are cool and
Yeah, there's less radiation.
Yeah.
Like there's the geostationary and sort of
Yeah.
deeper space environment, which is much more complex.
hectic. Yeah.
Um, and then kind of light bulb goes off. It's like, well, we actually could do something really useful for this artificial intelligence problem by actually just putting the chips up there, right? Where a lot of the work that we've kind of, and this is where I think a big focus for the company is going to be going into this year, next year, is that actually directly solves a lot of the energy problems for AI. And in particular, the kind of power scale that we're talking about is actually maybe not directly in the first instance applicable to the training problems or the ones where you need gigawatts of interconnected power, but the inference use cases are where the majority of the energy use is projected to go. And that these are use cases where you're talking about, 10, 20 interconnected GPUs, where to run inference on a model, you're kind of talking in the, say, 10 to 20, 30 kilowatt range. That you can actually do in space. And the advantage there, I'm kind of bridging between two ideas here, is you go from the terrestrial option, which is you get the silicon chips, and then you take it and turn it into a construction problem, and a connecting to the grid problem,
Yeah.
a building a power plant
Yeah.
on Earth
You
problem.
need thousands of people, you need turbines, you need all this stuff.
Where the alternative here is you turn it into an industrial manufacturing problem. Which, by the way, that's how you got the chips in the first phase, is industrial
Yeah.
manufacturing. And so, like, from that perspective, this actually should map pretty closely to the speed of it.
So you're saying you put like a little mini data center in
Yeah.
space, and then you're using the energy of the sun to power it, and then and then you still have to transfer these inference results back to Earth. Obviously, we can do like you would be piggybacking on Starlink, or you'd be building your own.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of options to get it down right now. You can use RF. I think the longer term version that we see is actually a lot of the advancements that we've made in the laser power transmission system actually directly translates also to optical data transfer.
Okay. I want to get into all this. I want to
Yep.
explain just super clearly to people the very basics. Like the thing that's orbiting in low Earth orbit is doing what? How is it gathering energy from the sun and then transmitting that to Earth?
Yeah. So our first mission this year um, goes into space on a rideshare mission with SpaceX, and the way the satellite works is built on top of a satellite bus from a company called Apex. So that system provides the power. So there's deployable solar arrays that collect power by orienting the panels towards the sun. Those solar panels, like our 3-5 cells, they go from incident sunlight to electrical current, which then energizes a big battery on the satellite. And so we actually charge that battery up as the satellite is orbiting the planet. And so that's the power generation side. The other side is the power transmission side, which is a infrared laser system that's connected to the battery, and basically an inverted telescope. So a set of optics that points down to the ground. And what it does is when it's over the area where it knows the ground station is, which the first demonstration is going to be at military bases and controlled airspace. What it does is it starts drawing power from the battery into the laser system. So the laser is a set of photodiodes that goes from electrical to optical. Like, honestly, not altogether different from like screens and stuff like that. And you have a bunch of these working in parallel. They energize and they combine into a fiber optic. There's another stage of the laser that takes that sort of divergent light. You can think of the diodes as basically flashlights. And it takes the divergent light and it straightens it out, basically, so that when you project it down to the ground, you get a tight spot on the ground.
Because you got to cut through space and atmosphere and all this stuff.
Yeah, and you need to achieve like a useful level of power density to then be able to rectify the power into electrical current on the ground. So if you just diffuse the energy over like a football field or like 3 or 4 football fields, you might not be able to actually generate any power from it. And this kind of also maps to the longer term use case for this technology, which is having small portable receivers that are, in the future state, I think going to be on the order of like 5 meters in diameter or smaller. In the first instance, it's going to be 10 plus meters in diameter spot that it projects down on the ground. So satellite's passing overhead. It starts sending out a test signal where it thinks the ground station is. And the ground station is effectively a solar array that's tuned for the frequency of light that we're transmitting, along with reflective optics on it that take a percentage of the light that hits the ground station and bounces it back to the satellite. And on the satellite side, there is another set of optics, which are kind of the receive optics, that looks for that return signal. And when it gets the return signal, it's like, all right, that's a ground station, because we're seeing the light that we're shining coming back to us. And then from there is able to basically like say, okay, this is the ground station, and it's going to stay pointed on that target as it passes overhead.
Gotcha. Okay, and Atherflux is based in San Mateo, I think.
San Carlos.
San Carlos. Okay, and so, and if you've got Apex working on the satellite bus part, which is kind of this common equipment that anybody doing satellite type stuff needs. So it's great. You don't have to like replicate all that. You guys are focused on the optics,
Yeah.
on this laser, on all the battery, on all the energy parts of this.
Mhm.
And then
And also in the time frame that we've done this, right? Like I started working on this full time March of 20, is it 24? 25? 25. What year was that? Jesus Christ. 2 years ago.
Okay.
2 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. So moving quick.
Yeah, and you can't, I mean, it's pretty difficult to go from zero to like manufacturing a whole satellite,
yeah.
all the components of it, and to build this very bespoke, first of its kind power transmission system. And so the idea was like, how can we demonstrate this? It's going to come back to the central thing that I keep saying without turning it into a science project.
Yeah,
How do you
'cause
do this with engineering and economics?
because that you could be on a 20-year money bleeding
Yeah.
venture. And so when you're on a SpaceX rocket in June, July,
Yeah, target is June.
and then you have a second one after that,
Yeah.
which is also this year.
Yeah.
So you're trying to build two of these systems this
Mhm.
year to go up and do these demonstrations.
Mhm.
And so you think the first one goes up and then it's sending back to a receiver on, you said kind of like a military
Yep.
base or something like that. And so you guys are I don't know when this will air. We're recording this at the very end of January. You got to get on the rocket, get certified. Usually have to do that a couple months ahead of time. So, but you guys are feeling okay about that.
People are working overtime right now. We're discovering problems and then fixing them and discovering problems and fixing them. Like our team is working nights, weekends, long hours.
Yeah.
It's grind fest right now.
And so when people hear about, an energy plant in space sending this stuff with lasers back to Earth, is a very sci-fi concept. I think Atherflux, does that come from an Asimov book or?
The concept of space solar power comes from an Asimov book.
Yeah.
The Atherflux comes from the old Aether theory of light
Okay.
and like the Michelson-Morley experiment. which
Okay.
I love that.
Can you explain it real quick?
Yeah, so there was this theory pre-Einstein that light as a wave behaves like other waves, meaning it's got a medium that it's transmitting through, right? Because sound travels through air, waves travel through water. So if light is a wave, like what is this medium that it's traveling through? Well, people were like, well, it's called the aether, right? And well, pre-Einstein, there was this question of like, okay, well, if it's traveling through this medium, let's ask some of the basic questions about how light works. In particular, how fast is it going? And so there's this famous experiment called the Michelson-Morley experiment, which takes a light source and basically splits the light, passes some of the light in this direction and the other light in an orthogonal direction, reflects it back, and presumably, if you're doing this, then because the light source is on the Earth, which is rotating around its axis and is also rotating around the Earth, that you should expect to see light moving slightly faster in this direction versus at a 90-degree angle, right? Because like if you're on a car and you have a baseball in your hand,
Yeah.
and the car's going down the road this way, you throw the baseball, the speed of the baseball that you see on the ground is the speed of the car plus the speed of the baseball you're
Yep.
throwing it, right? And so they do this experiment and it comes back and it's the exact same. And they're like, what the hell just happened here? And they're like, well, and then there's all these like ways that people try to explain this. Like, well, maybe the aether is this like very viscous substance, that there's effectively frame drag as the Earth is rotating and sort of around the sun. And like, that's why you get these effects. And then Einstein comes along with the special theory of relativity, and he's basically like, all y'all have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. Like, this is not how it works. Light is the same speed in every reference frame, and it's actually, this concept of time dilation and length contraction that sort of explains why, independent of the reference frame, the speed of light is this like, it's like this like sort of like, this sort of like precious thing that doesn't change. And I always just thought that was like a very, very cool story. And I've always loved old science and kind of the way that people
Yeah.
thought things would work
Yeah.
versus the way they actually work.
So you
Yeah.
adopted it,
Yeah.
and how do you think? Like, how are people going to react to? I mean, I get the science is like, I'm sure it's probably fine for us to have laser beams of energy beaming down all over the place from space. But are people gonna, if this is like a one-off, it's okay. But in some future scenario with all this stuff raining down upon us, do you think people are gonna react to this idea?
I think we have to make it safe.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point you're getting at, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, is it safe to have all these energy beams?
Well, we're designing it for safety, and I
Yeah.
think we have to show that it is, right? And the one of the things kind of related to the safety system that kind of has to do with this reflective optics concept is we have the receiver on the satellite that's basically asking the question like, am I seeing a return signal? And the concept is that if it stops seeing a return signal, that means that there's something in between you and where the ground station is. And so it just turns itself off. And the question is how quickly can you turn it off
Yeah.
if something is in the way? And the answer is the speed of light, right?
Right.
Like it's kind of the theoretically fastest way. Like how could you tell the satellite stop it? Well, you would have to encode the stop doing it signal in light and a direct path. And so that's kind of the way it's designed. Worth noting that the system that we're launching and putting into space is intended to be safe, kind of, on the ground as such. Like the power level is low enough that it's safe.
Like, what would be the things people would be worried about? It's just this like, is it energy hitting a person, hitting an object? I'm not sciencey enough to know the.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, we have to just show that we're not going to be beaming power where we're not supposed to.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were when we were talking about some of the military applications a while ago, you used a couple phrases about this. It was like words, this check between them. You used a couple phrases that I hadn't heard before, just to describe that process. It was something about the coherency of the connection.
Oh, linking the two satellites?
Yeah.
Satellite and the ground station?
Yeah, yeah. There was I think you were using lingo to describe what we just talked about this process where you're making sure.
Oh, getting the return signal?
Yeah.
Yeah, the receiver on the satellite is basically busy pulling the return signal. Like if return signal, then transmit.
Right.
Kind of logic.
I'm forgetting this phrase. I
am too.
I wanted to
Jesus.
make sure I was thinking about the right thing. Okay, so you guys are getting into this, so you have to build for this launch. How are you on the receiver technology?
We're also going to build that.
But you feel like you're going to do the launch, satellite will be up, and then you will have the receiver done relatively.
Yeah, I think we'll have it. I mean, I think we'll have it ready on time.
And then, when I was looking through all this and I was digging on LinkedIn, I noticed you guys have these laser engineers. And then, when you're on LinkedIn and you type in space laser engineer, SpaceX is just full of hundreds of these people because they've been doing Starlink for a while, and they have these communications between the satellites. It did raise the question in my head. This is clearly probably within SpaceX's skill set to do something like this. I feel like they've reached this point where they're such a giant and they have almost a monopoly over launch to some degree, that anything they want to get into in space, it's like this. It's like Google unearth, whatever they want to barge into,
Yeah.
and disrupt whatever some startup has been working on. Is that a concern that Elon decides, oh yeah, this is a good idea. We're going to do this too.
I mean, I think it is a concern. I mean, it is and it isn't, right? Like that it's always theoretically possible, but I mean, just kind of remember the world that I came from here, right? Like it was like two scraggly haired dudes from Stanford that were like, we think we can do something that the rest of the finance industry could clearly do. But we think that we have a path to sort of like get there anyways, right? So I think I think if we stay focused on what we're doing and we do a good job at it, like that's how we control our own destiny, basically. and there's always going to be people that can compete at the thing that you're doing. Um, but I don't always find that to be a super relevant thing as an entrepreneur to like over rotate on. You kind of have to, before you get to that, the prerequisite is like the thing that you're doing has to actually work. So just focus on that. And if you're pioneering the thing that you think is important, like you're going to inherently have, you know, the lead on that in many ways, because you're going to be the people that sort of went from like idea to reality with the concept.
You talked about not wanting this to be this 20-year science experiment. There's cool stuff here where it reminded me of some of the things Elon has done where really in the early days of his companies, what he's best at is like integrating existing technologies. It's like the Falcon 1 was not some super original rocket in many ways. We've known how to make rockets
Yeah.
for 50 years. The physics, there's only like so much creativity you could actually have in doing it. The Falcon 9, kind of the same thing. And then he kind of gets to this point where it's like, okay, but we are innovating on the electronics. We're doing them cheaper. We are making some tweaks to the materials. And then obviously you get to things like reusability. But those initial years, it is funny because it's like you said, sort of in the finance industry, like somebody else could have actually done this. It didn't require a breakthrough that we didn't know about. It just took this focus on doing it this better way. It seems like with you guys, all the technology bits and pieces actually like exist on some level already.
Yeah. I mean, large deployable photovoltaic arrays, doing it very cheaply. Like these are not new things. Like other people have done this before, right? Also, the radiator systems cooling the thing, like people have done this before, right? There's also the laser system and the diodes, and how do you get power scaling at this sort of like larger power level? It's like, well, people have done this before. There's industrial tailwinds behind each one of the component technologies that even independently of what we're doing, people are maturing those things. And I think that's a great place to be, right? Like you want to be building things that are greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, in my opinion, is like the role of the entrepreneur is like, yes, there's going to be times that you have to invent things or kind of create things from scratch, but like, how can you take things that exist today and do stuff with them that people hadn't thought about doing before? And I think this idea is very much captures that concept very cleanly, I think.
And you said not a 20-year mission. In my experience, almost any hard tech company that leaves a lasting mark is at minimum a 12-year
Yeah.
experience. Is that, look, man, you made a lot of money. I've seen countless Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Jeff Bezos, all kinds of dudes who want to do cool stuff, super well intentioned, way into it. They, for some reason, don't stick with it. They lose interest. They are not sleeping on the manufacturing floor, keeping things going at this pace. I just see it like again and again.
Yeah.
It's hard to have a second act. It's incredibly hard to have a second act on something that's
With
hardware,
Yeah.
sci-fi. Yeah. So, if you're on this 12-year possible mission to actually see all this come through, is this something you personally are on like doing this day to day, or it's more like you want to assemble the team and somebody to drive this forward?
No, I'm doing it
You're in.
all day and all night. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting because my wife probably sees this, but like this is the most like there's like a renaissance of like sort of like the creativity, the excitement, the enthusiasm to like want to stay up and be working on this after the kids go to bed. Like 2 nights ago, I was like probably working on stuff until like 11:30 midnight. Like it is the alpha and the omega of my life. And I've kind of, I mean, yeah, because I want to succeed at this, right? I mean, whether or not I do or not, time will tell. But this is not a one of many, many, many things that I'm doing. Like this is like the main thing I'm focused on.
Okay.
And I kind of am that sort of entrepreneur. Like I'm not the entrepreneur that's doing a ton of angel investing. I do some angel investing for sure, but I'm not trying to sort of like peanut butter myself over a lot of different things. I think it has something to do with who I am, right? Like and how to say this without sounding like a toolbox in the process. Like, I'm fundamentally very interested in my own ideas.
Yeah.
And I know other people have very interesting ideas and I can appreciate them, but the way that my brain works is I want to make the thing I'm working on work.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way that I approached it last time around, and I'm trying to stay humble to it and kind of say, I really want this to succeed. I really want to be one of the few people that's been able to do very significant things at unrelated topics. Like, that's kind of like the high water mark for me.
Yeah.
If I want to do that, and I've done it once before, then the approach that I should take here should probably not be fundamentally different, because then you're just kind of rolling the dice, right? Like, I'm actually better suited to try to do this, at least the way I approach it, as similarly as I did the last time around. And the last time around, I was in the office like all day. I was in the office from when, right after the markets open usually until, I'd go for a workout in the middle of the day. I'd actually usually go for a run every day at
I
lunchtime.
saw you on a runner's podcast.
Yeah. Around Stanford campus, and I'd come back and I would be really sweaty in my afternoon meetings, and I would stick around usually until like 8 or 9 every night. It's a little harder with kids because you're just never going to see your kids if you do that.
Just got to put them on your back.
Yeah, I mean, I remind my kids, I'm like, you guys are playing like my boys love Legend of Zelda, and so they love playing Space Link.
Uh-huh.
Like, I have no idea what this game is, but it's like, you guys realize your dad is actually building space stuff? Yeah, so I remains to be seen, but like, yeah, I'm all in on doing this.
Have you been to a rocket launch?
I've never been to a
You've
rocket.
never been.
I
Yeah.
want to go.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you'll go. Where's is it Vandenberg or Florida?
I think we're launching out of Vandenberg.
Vandenberg. So I assume you'll go to
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, just a couple more questions because you've been super generous with your time. One company you have invested in, I believe, is Reflect Orbital.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's been a while since I looked at them, but I remember, I mean, they seem to be trying to put something in orbit that would concentrate the sun down to solar panels so that you get more oomph and more concentrated light on the
Yep.
solar panels, and that I think you could kind of go like 24 hours, or as long as you're able to point at the sun and kind of like keep it on the solar panels. Is this like it's just different to what you guys are doing in a lot of ways, but I mean, is it complementary? There's just totally two different problems.
I mean, we're fundamentally trying to solve the problem at hand is similar.
This is what I was kind of thinking. Yeah.
Very different approaches,
Yeah.
right? Our kind of take on this, and you're starting to see it as we sort of are putting a lot of focus now on this AI data centers and space concept. Like, our idea is that the really interesting thing here is electrical power in orbit, right? Like, space as a place for electronics applications, space as a place where you generate electrical power. That fundamentally involves having solar arrays as kind of the thing that you do in bigger and bigger and bigger scale. That's kind of the core idea behind this. And to kind of put a finer point on this, right, if you have an electrical power grid in space, which I think we will, and I think that as we start running out of energy on Earth, it's a natural place to put these electronics-hungry applications. There will be applications of it that will be power beaming. I think the power beaming side is going to find use cases in contested environments where there's no existing power grid. But of this core idea, another application is actually using the electrical power in orbit for the very energy-hungry applications, which we're going to be investing heavily in building the artificial intelligence side of the business as well. So this kind of all is about electrical power in orbit, and that there's going to be a power grid in space. That's what we're trying to do. Reflect Orbital, and if they listen to this, like, what's up, dudes? I haven't caught up with you guys in a while. I probably owe you guys a call at some point. I invested in them because I really like the two guys. I think they're entrepreneurs in the way that you kind of, when you see people like live, breathe, and eat their dreams, you're like, God, I just love to see that.
Yeah.
So I definitely see that in those guys. Their approach is about actually saying, hey, again, I don't want to be paraphrasing or, putting words in their mouth, but my understanding is that they say, hey, instead you can just put up reflectors, and by doing so, you're sort of power per mass is just the reflector. It's going to be very lightweight, and that you'll be able to project down all the power that you reflect as opposed to incurring these energy losses from converting it to electricity.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um,
I think I
but I
heard,
think both can work,
I
right?
heard some crazy uses for their technology. Like you could,
Light up a football field.
or you could have like a rave in the middle of the night. And I heard something about like in Dubai, like shine. It's the middle of the night, and
It'd be sick,
you
yeah.
turn on the light switch at this one spot in the desert, and everybody goes nuts.
Burning Man.
Yeah.
Burning Man.
Okay, those are the biggest questions I had. With the last one, just on kind of like optimistic, everything goes right sort of timeline for this. I mean, you do these demonstrations, things go well, you're building ever bigger systems. What's like to get to some kind of critical mass where you are doing something, either with inference or powering something significant out in the field for the U.S. military or something? What's your vision for sort of how long that takes?
Uh, I think by the end of the decade, it should be, again, this requires a Herculean effort over the next 5 years. I think that's the time frame where you'll start seeing this being, very relevant.
Yeah. Okay. So in over this last 2 weeks, I have talked to companies that are trying to do inference in the ocean with like bobbing
Yeah.
power systems. Up on this wall, there's a chip of rat neurons, in a dish, trying to harness like the power of actual neurons to do computing in new ways. I lived through this once before in some sense, which was like during the dot-com boom and the data center build out. Same thing happened. We were running out of energy. Everybody was trying new techniques. The second that the bust happened, and it just sucked all the wind out of all this stuff. And then we just went back to very traditional data centers for quite some time. So I feel like I'm having deja vu, and then and the things being thrown at me for where we do this computing are getting more and more radical, and I'm into them all, and I think they actually have uses whether we're in the middle of a AI boom or not. But there's obviously a scenario where we've spent a ton of capital on this thing, even though I think AI checks out over the long term. You can see a short term vacuum of money, waving
Mhm.
out that kills a lot of these great ideas. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, does that keep you up at night, or you're all in on this thing, and whatever happens in the macro, be damned.
Yeah, I think I'm in the category of the macro be damned. I think whether or not something like that happens, I think I'm of the opinion that AI is going to be significant enough. Um, I think one thing that is really interesting about this go round is this sort of like sovereign nation competitive dynamic, which I think is like why it's a race. And I think that's been very fun for me to kind of like seat my brain into more recently. Is like it's not just about doing it well or like growing. It's like there's a race component to it. Who can do it faster? Who can build the bigger thing faster? Because the idea is that as you get bigger and bigger and you get more and more intelligent, obviously, um, yeah. So I think that we're still just I don't like me personally. I don't see us exhausting the use cases for AI. I don't see us plateauing to the point that like more investment in the infrastructure is like, well, who gives a shit? My personal gut feeling is I don't see that happening. But yeah, the question is like, is this level of intensity around infrastructure build out going to be around forever? I don't know. I mean, look, I think the other part is like as we kind of study this market and the product that we're building there, which we'll have a lot more to talk about in the coming months. The biggest pain point that keeps coming back is like in order to bring online new chips or new data centers, the time delay is enormous. It's like 5 years, up to 8 years in some cases. Obviously, there's some ways that you could do it faster, but on the whole, you're looking at multi-year waits to get new megawatt class data centers online. Um,
Yeah, like isn't there like an 8-year backlog on turbines or something
yeah,
at the moment?
it's crazy. Um, and when you talk to people that like think about the infrastructure for AI, uh, it's like it's not like it's basically building a data center on top of a power plant, right? Not the other way around.
Right. Right.
It is very much about the energy infrastructure to get it to the next scale. And that's going to take a while. And I think that we're going to be able to do awesome stuff with it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we're just going to be able to do awesome stuff with it.
I
I'm
mean,
also not a doomer about this stuff.
Yeah.
I think every generation of humans tends to be more creative and interesting than the last. Like, we will figure out uses for this that don't result in a job apocalypse. My humble opinion.
I tend to go that way as well. Baiju, thank you so much. I was super greedy with your time. I think we actually just set the record for our. I do not do the Joe Rogan Lex, multi-hour thing. So you
I got there. Though.
I
I did
clearly
it.
enjoyed talking to you
Likewise,
very
yeah.
much. So I hope you did. I clearly did, because I think we set a record here. You're just you're doing so much fascinating stuff. You lived a really fascinating life, and I'm so into this. I couldn't be more. It's like the one. I feel like I tried to predict a lot of things in my book and took some risk, because it was still so attached to the government and some of this legacy money behind all this stuff. And so I've been waiting to see people like you come along and really, add some new life to this space economy. So
Cheers.
it's cool.
And I mean, from my perspective, right? Like, thank you for writing about this stuff and getting a humble finance bro more passionate about this.
I always give the Carlsons shit. I'm like, what are you guys doing with your life, man? You're too smart to be doing this. It works out. It seems to be working out okay for all you guys.
I mean, look, life is long. You got to do interesting shit.
All right, man. Thanks so much. I'll set you free. Really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you.
Core Memory Podcast is hosted by me, Ashley Vance, or Kylie Robinson, or both of us together. It is produced by me and David Nicholson. Our theme song is by James Mercer and John Sortland, and the show is edited always by the John Sortland. Thank you so much to Brex and E1 Ventures for all your support, and thank you most of all to everybody for listening or watching. We love you. Please leave us a like, a review, a subscribe, all those tremendous things. Thank you, and we'll see you again.